Yeah, that's a really great question. And I don't think anybody's ever asked me that.
I'm Deepak Chopra. You're watching New Realities.
Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld. I have a very special guest, someone I'm really excited about talking to today, Diana Pasulka. She is the author of two fantastic books on the UFO phenomenon, American Cosmic, and her latest book, Encounters. Thanks, Diana, for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
You know, I appreciate your intelligence and your research and your approach to the book because you lay out in Encounters. It's not a direct talking about the UFO phenomenon, but you talk about it, around it, and through it. Was that your strategy in writing?
Yes. Okay. So two things I study, religion and then the UFO phenomena, which I started to study in actually 2012, early 2012. And each of those, what I've noticed is that people have a stereotype idea of what they are. But once you start to scratch the surface, you recognize that there's so much more going on. And so my job is to teach religion to undergraduates at a university. But I have been talking to people of the whole spectrum of people about UFOs. And what I noticed and what I had gone into, when I studied UFOs, I had a very clear idea of what they were, and it was all misinformation from the media. Yeah. And so once I started to get rid of all that misinformation, I started to say, wait a minute, it's an event. These things are usually events, and they're transformative events for people, regardless if they have any woo stuff associated with them or not. And so I started to look at people, obviously people who are experiencers in every kind of way, not just full-on experiencers who feel like they've been experienced, like things coming into their room, but also pilots who see things in the sky and that's it. And they say, okay, it's changed my reality because I know that thing is not ours, right? Not of Earth. So, so the myriad ways people experience these kinds of things, and historically too. So I've been looking at that. So it's not a straightforward answer. What is a UFO or a UAP? So that's what I did, was I basically said, well, once people have this experience, these are the effects. And that was my strategy.
Right. Well, the subtext that I got from your book is that there's a huge change, and you use the word religious, and then I want to ask you about religious versus spiritual, but there's something shifting within the psyche of the general public that I think is the underlying feature of this book, Encounters. What is that thing that you think is shifting in our worldviews and our understanding of spirit and soul and consciousness? I know it's a big question, but what's changing, you feel?
It's a big question, but we need to talk about it. And I think everybody kind of already feels it happening. We are global, and now we're connected. We still have nation states, but really we don't have borders because of the internet. Okay, so this changes everything. It changes the way we do commerce. It changes the way we think, and it definitely changes our quote unquote religions. So a lot of people are born into their religion and learn it from their parents and pass down and that type of thing. But then when they get to a certain age, they question, okay, what is it? Should I keep this tradition? Or, they have these questions. And right now what's happening is that there is a spirituality quasi-religion. I call it a new form of religion, in which people are reassessing what's good from their religious traditions, and they're getting rid of what they think is old and archaic. And that catapults them into a situation where they get rid of the mediator, like they get rid of the priest, or they get rid of the, and they start to question, and they start to go into communities of people who are what we call seekers. And these people are actually having these experiences. And a lot of people who have these experiences of UFOs are catapulted out of their own traditional religions, or they get strengthened within their traditional religions, but in very different ways.
My problem with some of that is I was catapulted into this whole field. New Age, it was called, in the beginning of the 80s. So this is different than religious, because religion to me is based on belief. And this is not about belief in a sense. Do you know Bud Hopkins' famous line? It's really funny. But someone asks about UFOs. It seems like a cult or religion. Bud says to the guy, this is the opposite of a religion. A religion is, or a cult is, all belief and no miracles. This is all miracles and no belief. That's what makes this different. But why don't we just call it a spiritual phenomena? And the idea about spirit for me is understanding there's a science to incarnation. There's a science to consciousness. So if we call it religion, then we sort of take that science possibility away. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And of course, I understand where you're coming from. The situation though, and this is what makes my job somewhat difficult, is because I have a niche field, which means that it's small. And when we talk about religion, we generally talk about it to undergraduates, right? So young people who have never thought about religion before. But I think most people have inherited an idea of religion that's Western. It's Western centric. In this case, they see it as antithetical to science. And they also see it as monotheistic. And they also see it as devoid of miracles, which, by the way, almost every religion is a miraculous phenomena in the beginning. So I think that nothing to take away from your argument, but what I'm saying is that it's a very Protestant view of religion, because if you go to, what about Marian apparitions? Here you have all miracle, and you have the Catholic Church basically trying to make them go away, right? So when a miracle happens in the Catholic Church, they're very uncomfortable with it. They're like, okay, what do we do about this? And a lot of times they suppress the narratives. So in traditional religions that you and I are familiar with, say Protestantism, Catholicism, there's a push to get rid of the miraculous. And so my suggestion is that the UFO phenomena is the miraculous, just like Bud Hopkins said. Yeah. But we view these miraculous events as coming from a technologically advanced being, way more advanced than us. The pilots that we've talked to can say, oh, this is definitely way more advanced than what I've ever seen. Okay. We don't have fighter jets like this. So what I'm saying is that when I say it's a new form of religion, because it takes the miraculous and it puts it in the guise that we can accept, like it puts it in a new framework, and we accept it as intelligent people. We're like, that actually makes sense.
Absolutely. No, I totally get the Marian apparitions. I mean, for me, my personal cosmology includes all of that, all the so-called miracles. But I think, I was just at the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico City. Have you been there to see it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is. There's a vibration and a feeling and a calmness that emanates, and there's no paint that's on there. It's just been, in a way, manifest. So those are real for me. I mean, and I've even had my own glimpse of a sort of Marian apparition, and I've talked to Ingo Swann when he was alive about some of that stuff that he knew. But for me, I don't call it necessarily religion. It's a higher form of something, like the UFO thing. We can't expect to really understand at the levels, but I want to make a cosmology that makes all these things a reality that people can contemplate and include without categorizing it, I guess I'm saying,
I fully agree with you.
Yeah.
So that's why I included so many different perspectives in encounters. And each person has a different religiosity, you could say. And I end with a former atheist who has this extremely amazing and well-recorded experience when he's a kid, right, in the 1960s, completely changes his reality. He goes through atheism until he actually meets Fulton Sheen, right, who is this, talk about Catholic Church suppressing narratives. They really tried to suppress Fulton Sheen's TV show, Life is Worth Living, and he was even monitored by the FBI. Okay. So this is Fulton Sheen. He was a miracle in and of himself. I mean, he was a miraculous man with a lot of charisma. And so he turned this atheist into a believer, but he doesn't have a religion. And that's where I leave it. And so I hoped that Len Philpott is his name. I hoped that his experience would be like the send-off in my encounters book of like, listen, this is what's happening. People are being converted, but to what?
I love all that, because to what is great, it doesn't have to be to something, because it's not defined. You can't recognize something you haven't cognized first, right? That's the nature of reality. We're wiping the slate clean of the past and of belief, and facing the reality of a presence, whatever that is, and that in a way is miraculous. But personally, you call yourself a Catholic, right? And I'm just curious, if you don't want to be personal, but why did you have a sort of awakened conversion? And are you now seeing that maybe perhaps that might be an old worldview or not? I don't know. I don't know you. So
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. And I think it's a good question, because I know lots of people ask, think it in their head, like, why is she a Catholic?
yeah.
And that's a really good question. Okay, so it is a personal question too.
Well,
So no, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to answer it. Okay. So this is how I describe it. I was just describing it to somebody yesterday, actually. I'm not going to say that that's like a lot of Christians say, but I don't think Catholics actually say this. And by the way, a lot of people don't understand what Catholicism is, or Christianity for that matter. Like they haven't read the actual texts, and they have stereotypes about what it is. Jesus talked to marginalized people. He talked to women. He talked to lepers. He told people not to follow the rules, that the rules were actually made for them, not them for the rules. So he was basically really enlightened. And here he's talking to all these people. And it's a revolutionary movement that he starts. And then it gets taken into the Roman Empire and made into a state religion. And what they do with it is they suppress all of its amazing revolutionary elements. So I want people to know that my understanding of the Catholic Church is that it is that narrative of suppression. All right. However, it also created a lot of the institutions that we find ourselves in, and it still maintains that there's an idea of the presence of divine and sacred. Okay. Whereas the Protestant Reformation tries to get rid of that idea of the presence. Okay. And so I had my first, what you would call kind of experiences that I needed to study religion. I had a conversion experience at 11 to Christianity. And then I started to read the text and said, I can't understand what this means. And I have a feeling that it's been cooked, right? The books have been cooked. And I was right. Okay. So part of the reason that when I got into studying UFOs, I was able to understand the history of disinformation is because of redaction criticism, which is what we do in religious studies is we say, like Elaine Pagels wrote the Gnostic Gospels. And so what she did when she did that, which was in the 70s, was she had to learn the languages first, by the way, which was she uncovered a whole tradition that had been completely suppressed by the Roman Catholic Church of Gnosticism. All right. I feel like there are Gnostic Christians because Jesus's teachings live on, and they live on through people. And so that's why I'm a Catholic. Is because I keep to the tradition in the sense that I do the practices. Do I necessarily believe that Catholicism is the only way? No, right? No, I don't. But I do believe that practice is super important. And if we don't do the practices enable us to make these connections to divine, sacred, whatever you want to call those things. And so those practices are best when they're done with people. And so I have a lot of friends who I met during the course of my studies who are sisters, nuns, monks, brothers. This is my community. So that's why I'm Catholic. It's a very personal choice. I don't believe that it's the only way, but it's my way.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, it sounds like you've had a real experience of the divine. And this is, I mean, you don't have to tell us that, but it sounds like that's the thing that connects you to this bigger faith. But it seems to me in all awakenings, it's a personal sort of identification with the divine. And we can call it Jesus or this, but it's that divinity that we know is real. That, I mean, for me, I take it out of a religious forum and just have that connection, and and what I'm trying to do is create a bigger cosmology that includes UFOs and miracles and Marian apparitions and incarnation, you in that body, us in these bodies. It's a science, but we not looking in those directions. So, but I think your contribution is valuable because you're connecting people to a kind of awareness of divinity, which is obviously who we are.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah. No, I think we are. And I appreciate your emphasis on knowing, right?
No, yeah.
So I think that there's a Gnosticism that runs through almost all traditional religions. Okay, so you see it in Buddhism, you see it in Hinduism, you see it in Judaism, Christianity, right? There's this knowing that becomes, because we didn't have global societies back then, we had just local and regional societies. This is how, religions were the ways in which they kept that connection alive. Okay. A lot of those very intense connections, though, are revolutionary. And so institutions and governments suppress those. It's just what you see in the history of religions. There's a lot, you can see that once you study it for any time, like a year, you're studying religions, you've got to say, wow, there were some very egalitarian, amazing, people that were doing this, and they got wiped out by people in the name of religion. That's a fact.
Like the Cathars. I mean, who knows what was going on with the Cathars?
Yeah, exactly.
There are still Gnostic Christians in Egypt, but that's
right.
That's my point. The gnosis kind of supersedes religiosity to me because it's correct knowing.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you?
Yeah, I totally agree.
How do you bridge the two from, identifying within the religion and also being, in a way, a Gnostic, in a sense, a knower? How do you bridge those two?
So yes. Once you have a Gnostic experience, it determines what directions you take, right? And you kind of, in communication with that, whatever it is, your sacred, what do you do? Well, who said it? Gosh, was it like Francis of Assisi? You bloom where you're planted is what you do. Yeah. And then see what happens. And sometimes what happens is that, well, I mean, of course, this because I'm sure it's happened to you. Once these things happen in a life, there's a lot of pushback from conservative, people.
From your family.
From your family, a lot of times. Right. By the way, is fine with what I do. So, so I don't get pushback from my family, but obviously a lot of people do. So I think the UFO, when I look at people who are Catholic or Christian and they've had experiences of UFOs, it definitely cracks open their religion, and then they get all kinds of pushback from their denominational churches. But in the end, it seems to me what they do is they reinterpret their whole tradition from the UFO narrative, and they say, got it. Now I understand. And they become much more religious in the sense, when I say religious, they become much more dedicated and committed to living a radical life of this type of gnosis.
But do you think we're moving to a narrative, like we're in a liminal space now, a space in between worlds, in between epochs? We're right at the cusp of government revealing its secret. I mean, of course they have. Grush comes out and says, yeah, they have craft and biologics and bodies, and that's such a huge worldview. People have ignored it, but the government is saying this. So how do we integrate all of this into a bigger worldview that includes religion, all that, and makes it in a way okay to push this narrative of knowing to a bigger public?
So this is also such a great question. I've had some people, it might have been you, Alan, who sent this to me just recently in email exchanges, I think. Wrote these books many years ago, but now I understand them in a completely different way. Okay, so they do this creative work that actually is from their future. Yeah. And then when they get to that stage in their life, they're like, oh my goodness, how did I know that then? Right. And this is what I think of about, okay, so when I look at Friedrich Nietzsche, who hated religion, right? But loved spirituality. He never said it like that, but if I could paraphrase him, he's
No,
that. So he liked
thus spoke Zarathustra is like quite a holy text in a way. It's his channel.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely is, because he's going beyond the Jewish and Christian tradition to what he thought was the beginning, right? And he's literally writing in religious scripture, right? Because he's okay. But he would hate for me to say that, by the way. I just want to acknowledge that. Okay, so Nietzsche, though, was writing to a very particular audience, and he called this audience the future philosophers. Now he died, I think, in 1900, but don't
Right
quote me
around
on
then,
that.
yeah. But
Yeah. So who were the future philosophers? Well, guess what? They're us, right? And so he's writing for us, who then pick up his book and totally get it and love it.
Right.
And then what happens is that we do our work. And, so you ask, what can we do, blah, 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 to make this, this kind of thing. I think we've done it, and I think we're doing it. And I don't think that, I think we are speaking to future philosophers too, Alan. Like
Right.
you wrote a book for audiences that are that's happening now.
Yeah.
That happened to American Cosmic. When I wrote it, I said to Tyler, who's in the book, I said, I feel like I'm from the future, but I didn't recognize that the future was going to happen in 2021. So it happened. And now, so that's what I'm trying to say is like this, what do we do now? I think we've done it.
Well, we're still doing it. We're in the middle, where we have to just stick to it. But are we also, I don't know, agents for the phenomena, the intelligence, whatever you want? I feel like these downloads just given to me. It's so exciting that I feel like we're agents of that intelligence. Do you feel that way?
Okay, so this is a good question. All of the people in my book, they feel on fire with something that it's almost like a mission that they have, right? And especially the people who are affiliated with the military that I talk to. By the way, think of this: Gnostic military people. They actually exist, okay? And what happens is they learn everything they can from the military. Then they have this kind of transformative UFO experience. And then they're like, oh, my mission is totally different now. But they use all the tools that they learned in military training for this mission of, like Jose is a good example of helping young people, right, go through, social media and, that kind of environment, and how to help their mental health through this and their spiritual crises and things like that. So, so I think that, to answer your question, I think that a lot of people are having that feeling. I don't know what it means.
You have that passion, I think.
Yeah, I have had a passion. I had a passion for studying this field. Like, I didn't define it as ufology or anything back in the day. I thought of it as like spirituality, religious, like experience and things like that.
But maybe you've been prepared through your religious studies to be the perfect person to kind of then bridge that understanding into this next level of consideration. Is that possible?
So, well, this is what I think. I think that one of the skills that I've developed is to identify people who are in science and who have had these download experiences that you're having, right? That you have, and to say, we need to pay attention to their work. Right. Like, Gary Nolan or Tyler D, Jack Ballet, and also Whitley, Dr. Whitley, who's really interesting. Oh, yeah. She's the So so these people are thinking in different ways, and they're super successful scientists. So in a sense that their spirituality, they're spiritual and they're scientific, and the ways in which they do their science, they do their science in a spiritual way. So that kind of answers a question about, where, how does religion and science? Well, it's a spirituality that they definitely have. They see the world in absolutely spiritual terms.
It just feels like you're, you're on the team there. So it's like, there you go.
I'm not sure if I'm on the team. I always feel like I was translating what they were doing so that people could understand them, because I'd meet them and I'd say, I think people really need to know that this person exists. And so I'd write them into my book, and, of course, with their permission.
Yeah.
And then and I was right. People really did want to know what these people thought.
Yeah, and the way you lay them out, all these people in your book, I whatever 6 or 7 people, is in a way of these nexus points that then the reader connects. Oh, this is the next level, the animal intelligence, talking to dolphin, and then talking to computers, and then this, what is the phenomena. I just like the way you kind of organize your material, because it makes the reader think. But you also say there's a group of people who've managed the public narrative of the UFO. So there's these people managing the narrative, and there's other people with this compulsion to talk about and speak about. And so who are these people? I mean, you don't have to name names, but why are they choosing to manage?
Yeah. Okay, so Alan, this is where we get back to the whole thing about religion, because you're like, we shouldn't call it a religion, this and that. Well, we should never call these things religion, right? But we do. And the reason we do is because you can see it in the traditional religions. When these Gnostic elements spring up that are revolutionary, another element comes down and tries to narratize it, and to, so we see that here. And that's the one thing that I was trying to explain in, when I was doing some work in the 2001, was I begin to see the military, say, okay, we've got this, we've got this truth, we can explain it to you and everything. And I thought, wait a minute, people have already been explaining this. Like, I don't think you really need to explain it to us, but that's what they're doing. So we see now a lot of people who know nothing about UFOs, they'll go on, the internet or social media, and they'll see that the government has it all figured out, right? They're like trying to tell us what it is and everything. And so that's another element to the development of a religion.
You're saying there's a
not just the pushback, but the group that thinks of themselves as the people that should run things. And now they're basically saying, we have the answer, it's here. You have to listen to us.
But why do they feel the need to confine it when it's unconfinable, the phenomena itself?
Yeah, this is such a great question, and I have the same question. And why do they have to do it so brutally?
Yeah,
like, why do they have to hurt people or suppress their voices, and why does it have to be this thing? And I ask that, and I guess my answer, I don't have an answer, but I have a position. Okay, and I can tell you what my position is right now on it. And I do articulate that in encounters. Basically, when I started to see the extent of the organized narrativizing of this new kind of movement, and which is not new, by the way, but which people are now in mass having, I started to go back to the allegory of the cave by Plato, and even Jesus's Gospels, which I looked at again, and I thought, because I've looked at them so many times, of course, and I reread that, and I'm like, okay, got it. So there's some kind of a structural element here that at least people in Western traditions and probably in Eastern traditions, though I don't really see it in indigenous communities. So it's not universal, but it's definitely within the tradition that you and I share of government and social structures and culture. There's a structural element where you see this kind of pushback. So I don't have an answer for it other than that we shouldn't really change how we are, but there's that. It is there. I'm not going to deny it's there.
But it's about control. I mean, and going back to Jesus didn't consider himself a Christian, these
of course
factors that come in afterwards and I think, you say somewhere in the book, there's elements above the secret government, which I think implied to me an interface between the ETs or the phenomena themselves and people controlling the narrative. Is that what you, and somehow there's, some of these people are carrying out the orders of this bigger phenomena? Do you imply that sort of?
Well, listen, the only thing that I could say about the control mechanism is that there are people doing it. We know that. And that I've met people who do it. Now, how they do this, why they do this, I describe some of their motives in the book. Some of their motives are that they have a view of humanity that's dim. They think that humans and maybe they're right, by the way, in some form. They say humans they don't care, they're gonna kill you or something, or if you have these ideas that we should all work together and have a great world, which we could do, of course. There's a good portion of the humans that are not going to go with you, and they're going to use you for their work, and these things are going to happen to you. And if you don't see that, you're really naive, right? So I met them, and they had good arguments, right? And I listened to them, and they, by the way, they happen to be super educated people too. So that was an element. I don't know, other than their own belief systems, they obviously feel that they are doing some type of God's work. That's all I can say.
No, or maybe they're just so into power. This is what I think. They are the matrix. They want to control the matrix. They don't want anything to get out of line. Then there's the phenomenon itself, thing to get out of line. And then there's the phenomenon itself. Whitley thinks that the phenomenon doesn't want the secret out all at once. They want to shock people. I just interviewed him the other day. He said, people need to be shocked when this thing comes online. And he says, that's the only way we're going to gather the importance of this object at the end of time. I don't agree with that. I think what seems to be happening, because of people like Elizondo and of course Gary Nolan is major in pushing the envelope. You were at the Soul Foundation meeting where they talked about the devastating disclosure and the smooth disclosure. How do we start to push for this integration of disclosure, in your opinion?
Okay, so contrary to what a lot of people think,
yes.
I haven't, nor have I ever been like a disclosure person. Like, I'm an advocate for disclosure or anything like that. There are a lot of communities, in my book, I talk about indigenous communities. I start the book with people who say, a Lakota woman who says, contrary to what you believe, we've been in contact, right? So Suzanne Kite. I do believe that what we're talking about is a disclosure that's been formulated in order to keep people thinking that we don't have disclosure.
I think we're getting close to something. I mean, if we push for congressional hearings and eventually somebody comes forward and says, yes, I'm the one who, and we have the technology, we have the bodies. I think the best thing to do for the public is to roll it out, and this is just my fantasy, and have the human population look at the situation together and see what's going on here. What can we make of this as intelligent people, academics, whatever, what's going on here? And of course, that's going to change a lot of worldviews, but I think, call it disclosure or not, I think it's a narrative that could happen and change the world.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing.
And also the technology, obviously they're not filling up their gas tanks to get here, right? So if they have a technology to get the world off of fossil fuel and stop the pollution, don't you think that is a benefit to humanity? And that's what's behind it.
I think that, one thing that happened to me too, when I was about 18, I was taking physics in college, and my physics professor said, this is a long time ago. And my physics professor said, we have electric cars, and we could do this, and, we could get off of fossil fuels and all of these things, my physics professor. And to me, I was like, what? Is that true? So I did a lot of research, and I was like, and this is way before the internet. Okay. I did all this research, and I came to the conclusion that this guy was right. And I thought, that means all of our problems have nothing to do with technology and everything to do with character. And that's something that was a huge revelation to me, because here I was thinking, if we could just get this technology, and if we could do, and I was in a tech type of environment, and I was on the route to do this, like create this technology or do this, and I was taking engineering physics, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. But then when he said that, it got me completely off of that track, because I thought, he's right.
Right. So when you
we
say
already have this,
do you mean greed, the greediness?
Yeah.
Right.
Character.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
like, what kind of human beings? We can't get along. We're constantly fighting. We can't even stay married. for the
Right.
most part. You know what I'm saying? Like,
can
you
speak
know,
to
we
that.
cycle through friend communities and stuff like that. We just can't, we're not good at taking care of each other.
Mm,
So these are the things that I decided I'd focus on, is those kinds of things. You know, do we have communities where we could care? Well, that's part of why I'm Catholic, by the way, because, and I'm going to give some personal information here.
okay.
Again, at the same time I was 18, my parents went to Esalen, right? Esalen is the New Age community, right?
Yeah.
And I'm from California, by the way. So they're very, even though my mother Jewish and my father, his parents are Catholic, and they had this when they were, well, actually, my mother came from a very secular Jewish standpoint. My father was, you know, went to Catholic school, but they were very New Age,
Mhm.
right? They were successful New Age people. And so they sent me to a Catholic school. And so I went to this Catholic school and I actually saw these nuns who were doing liberation theology. They were going to Central America and helping people who were being disappeared and killed, and children and things like that. So as a young person, I saw the difference between what I felt was very capitalist kind of, you know, narcissistic view. Not to say my parents are bad, but they weren't doing what these nuns were doing. And that made a huge impact on me. And I was like, okay, then I'm going to be like these nuns. Like, I just think that this is a better way to be, honestly, for our world and for me, because they were happier than my parents were. My parents were getting divorced. My parents were having issues, you know, and they were in these kinds of things that I thought I learned from that experience. I hope you see that, you know, that is part of what kept me Catholic, was that the values that Sister Rose had, you know, were values that I thought were going to help me in life.
No, I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate how important that was for you at that moment to see, to go over the material, go beyond the materialization of American culture and see there's people making a difference, and why that would affect someone so sincere like yourself. Because you're sincere in the book. I mean, you really, in a way, love these people that you're writing about. I can feel that you have this real, you know, deep feeling and honor for these people. I mean, that's sort of a message that comes through. You respect them, honor their intelligence and their experience, and you're doing that same missionary work in that way. And the other thing, though, getting back to the UFO phenomenon, you say, you quote Jacques Vallée in the book, I mean, a couple of times. And I know Jacques, he actually wrote me a nice letter about my book. So he says this disclosure is going to be released through intermediaries. Do you remember that
The
line?
government intermediaries. Yeah, yeah.
And so is that what's happening now? Is how much does, you don't have to tell us how much Jacques knows, but obviously he's been inside it from since the late 50s. What do you expect is coming down the line here?
Okay, that's a great question. One of the things I said in American Cosmic, I still believe, and that's that the people who we identify as on the inside, they're kind of on the inside, they're more on the periphery, and that includes me. So there's not a lot of people talking or are known. Even David Grush, who has a lot of information and a lot of quote insider information, you know, he's still on the periphery because he's given this information from people supposedly on the inside.
I think
Okay.
so.
And I have met people who I suspect are on the inside, and they're so tight-lipped. Like, they are so incredibly careful. And the way that you can, and I talk about ways to gather information from what I've learned about my own field, you know, that a lot of information is oral tradition. And I think that's the case with insider knowledge about UFOs, not written down. And, you know, classified information is in people. And that's why these people won't say, and we won't know, because once those identities are out, do you know how many people will be around them and, you know, using different technologies to gather that information? I mean, it just makes a person's life horrible, right? So, so I think that the people, then the information we will have, I mean, honestly, I don't think there's going to be like the kind of disclosure that you're hoping for. and the
Well,
kind of disclosure that, if a disclosure is going to happen, like you suggest, where there's full transparency like this, it's going to be on accident.
yeah.
It's going to be on accident from humans, because humans wouldn't do that, I don't think.
The thing you lay out about networks and AI, and how do you think AI can be sentient in the way that some people are thinking about it, and be a kind of intelligence of the phenomenon itself?
Yes, so I don't know. Okay, so I definitely know that lots of people in AI think so, and think that we already have an AI sentient. We already have a sentient AI. Okay, I learned this at the Soul Foundation. I met some people who did believe that, and I personally don't know this. I'm interested to see how. I think it's not a coincidence that we have a lot of, what would you call it, political discussion of UAPs and UFOs at the very same time that we're having what's called an artificial intelligence revolution, where artificial intelligence is all of a sudden changing everything, and so I think that that's not a coincidence. I don't quite know yet how the relationship is. One person, Simone, in my book, suggests that yes, there's going to be the consciousness that has unveiled itself to humans through religion is now going to unveil itself within AI, and that yes, we best be prepared for this, because this will be shocking, and it is already shocking. And she thinks that it's good. She thinks that it's a really positive development.
Some people think it's not so good. It frightens them, and they think it's a takeover. But maybe because we've been so warlike, we need something like this. We need something to kind of raise us up, like the phenomenon, like the UFO phenomenon, like AI, like something that gets us out of the kind of messes we've made for 5,000 years. But everyone uses the term supernatural, paranormal to describe aspects of the phenomena that can't be explained. But isn't there a better way we can integrate those experiences by instead of those labels which make it woo, where it's a science, it's something that we don't understand?
I think totally.
Yeah.
I'm in absolute agreement with you about that. There's a
Yes.
lot of young people right now that I've been talking to who basically are trying to reformat the language, because they take something like precognition or mind reading or something like that, and they rework the terms, because they know that it has a lot of connotations. And by the way, the whole history of the UFO has been that too. It used to be a flying saucer, and then they're like, let's try to de-woofy this, right? Let's make it the UFO. And then the UFO retains a lot of this baggage, and they're like, we need to change it again. So the whole history of the UFO has been a history of trying to do that. Yes, I totally think that. So let's take like reading one's mind, or something that we talk about and we think, okay, that's woo, right? And I've published articles about this technology that we actually have now. We've had it for many years, not a lot, but we've had it, where scientists will be able and are able right now to use computers to read what's going on in our brains, right? Because our brains function with brain waves, right? And so they're able to take MRIs of a person's brains and have that person think about, say, a Van Gogh painting, and then the computer will generate that painting, and they'll say, wow, this is exactly what you were looking at. And so what is that? Well, that's a way to access our brains that and that doesn't involve talking. Okay, so I think that a lot of what we're, even when you go back and you look at the Marian apparitions, those apparitions are doing things that we can probably now maybe replicate through certain types of technologies, even though that would be a blasphemous thing to say, because it's a miraculous thing in the Catholic Church, which I understand. And there are things which we will never be able to replicate, but reading one's mind seems like it's going to be replicated.
Well, I don't think anything, I think miracles are a science we have yet to understand. So even when I talked to Hal Puthoff, he talked about the levitating people, and he said, their hair was also levitating, which shows they were in a quantum field. That's what he said. and
Yeah, I believe that too.
but there's so many. We're at the verge of understanding, I think, this next level. I think this is why the UFO, according to Young, and is appearing now, because we're ready to shift these levels of consciousness. And I'm really happy you brought in the Aboriginal ideas at the end, and the dream time thing. That's why I, in a way, disagree that AI can be conscious, because what we have as human consciousness, and I learned this from the Aborigines, is the ability to tap into dream time. And how it was explained to me was, if you're falling asleep, it was a practice, and you watch your thoughts until they're no longer your own awareness of thought, but things start to stream into your mind that's not normally in your everyday consciousness. And this Aboriginal elder said, then you're in the dream time, when it's no longer under your, but you're witnessing, you're the witness of that. And it's sort of the unknown, it's the imagination. William Blake said the imagination is the true human being. So I don't think AI has the facility or capability of accessing this infinite unknown awareness that we really are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that position. I don't agree with it, but yeah, I understand
no,
your
what
position.
you, no, tell me what you think. It doesn't even have to agree. I'm interested in what you think about that.
Yeah, so I would have agreed with you like 3 years ago, but I've been like, changed by interactions with people in the communities. A lot of people in those communities don't even like to call it AI, as you know, I'm sure.
Right.
They say it's not artificial. Like, we create like paintings, but they're not artificial. We don't say that's an artificial replication, know. Okay, so there's quantum computing. And I think quantum computing is where we get to this field that is beyond space-time, right? Now, listen, this is way outside of my
That's okay.
Everyone has to understand that. Like, don't quote me as saying these ridiculous things about something of which I have no clue. But it's changed how I think. And that's what I'm explaining to you, is that through the interactions with people who do know about this and who recognize that something like quantum computing is accessing information that appears to be beyond space-time because of like superposition and that type of thing. I mean, think about that. That has such wide implications. And also the whole idea of our, progressing through time, which we know now is not linear, right? It's, okay, so what if, because a lot of people will come back to me and say, but we've created this. And I'll say, but then who created us? And,
Right.
So if we look at this linear time frame, these kinds of questions become nonsensical and we have to drop them. And we're going to have different questions. I guess that's my point, is at some point our questions are going to be meaningless because they're situated within an way of thinking that, like, let's put it this way. You just spoke about, I'm assuming, Indigenous Aboriginal. Okay, so yeah, Indigenous people in Australia have this amazing ontology that seems to be, when I say ontology, I mean like, epistemology, worldview.
Right.
That seems to be, from my perspective as an outsider, they seem to have this down, this idea of the quantum field, right? And they have their ways of talking about it. So it seems to me that for us, if we're interested, when I say us, I'm talking about like non-Indigenous people who've had, less, not an insight into this, which apparently they've had an insight to. And here I would just recommend a book called Sandtalk. This will catapult people into a new way of thinking, because the person who wrote it, Tyson Yunkaporta, has access to this worldview. So he kind of lives in two worlds here. And I think that's helpful to us. So that's the only reason why I disagree with the way that, you're suggesting that AI won't be able to. I think it probably will, even though a lot of people disagree with me. And well, I'm okay with that.
No, I appreciate you explaining that, but I don't think AI, or maybe it will, understand, like in your first chapters, talked about the Earth language, the presence of the Earth. If it can do that, then I'll have to go along with it. The AI could start to duplicate that natural language of the Earth itself. Is that possible, you think?
Okay, so that's such a great comeback. I like that as a comeback because, yeah, I think you might be right there. Whereas it won't be because it's organic. What I'm talking about, this like organic language, and you and I are organic creatures that have grown up within this. Yeah, so I think that we would be the things that would be most prepared to understand both the AI kind of way of thinking, because we have created AI, or I'm sorry, not or, and the Earth language, but AI would not be part of that.
Right.
But we would be the kind of, we would be the AI, right? Because we would be like understanding both types of networks.
Well, maybe we are the AI of the Earth, actually, because we're taking over and destroying it. To wrap it all up, where are you going with this? So I think you've come to a place in this book where you relax into the phenomenon exists, it's undeniable, and and you can't pin it down, and that becomes a sort of abstract space for a lot of people that are awakening, experiencing. So where are you going with all of this in your studies and your research and your excitement?
So I'm the organic network and the ability to like hook in and that type of thing, and the ability to character development and that type of thing. That's what I'm focusing on now. So I'm actually that's where I'm at, is I'm not necessarily looking at UFOs or disclosure or the communities or anything like that. I'm looking at the history of religions, basically, in the sense of these protocols that I see all these people who have these missions and so forth. They then develop this way to live and their life ways. And so I'm looking at these life ways, and I think that they can actually help people. Jose, in my book, he talks about how to help young people deal with, the influx of all of this information, that they're getting. And, he's suggesting very specific ways of dealing with that, well, go outside, and, get off that network and try to understand that there's this organic network. And so I'm doing that in my way. Like, I have ways of like teaching how to do that too.
You're still pursuing the UFO study. I mean, it's still of interest. It's still a fascination.
Yeah, of course, but differently than I did before. So I most likely won't write a book about UFOs. Gosh, I say that. I said that last time too, but I am writing a book right now, but it's a book that I'm co-authoring with Simone, and it's about the protocols.
I think it's important you wrote this, and congratulations. I mean, Netflix loved this. I mean, I guess you were a consultant on Netflix because they used the same. And that was pretty amazing, wasn't it, for that to happen?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it was such a strange thing to be a part of. But they listened to my consulting. So I consulted for them, and they listened, and I was really happy about it. And by the way, the confluence of encounters and them calling it encounters happened accidentally. I know it doesn't seem that way, but it was completely on accident.
Oh, I thought they took your book and, I see. Well, maybe there's no coincidence, right? That just kind of...
Yeah.
It just catapulted you even to a bigger framework, because what you're writing in this book is a really good unfolding of the phenomena for people who don't know what to make of it. And you're reframing it out of the woo and back into like the intelligence, integrative human being. I think this is the call for encounter.
Thank you. That's a nice way to put it. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I've been talking to Diana Pasulka, our new book, Encounters. I hope to have you back on the program. Thank you for watching, everyone, at New Realities.